You're listening to the Sisters-in-Laws podcast, a faith-based podcast that spotlights Black women who replace silence with storytelling around pregnancy and infant loss and infertility. Black women experience miscarriage and stillbirth 4 to 5 times more likely than white women, according to the NIH and CDC. Whether you've experienced a miscarriage, infant loss, stillbirth, are trying to conceive, or have an infertility diagnosis, you will learn about resources and strategies to heal, gain clarity, peace, hope, and find an empowering path forward after loss. I'm your host, Erica M. McAfee, and you will hear me interview sisters-in-laws who have healed from such a painful and traumatic experience by sharing their testimonies and stories to inspire and help others turn their pain into their purpose. Now let's get started. So I would love for you to share your story in its entirety, and then obviously I will prompt and ask questions as necessary.
Okay, so my name is Dominique Timmons. I am 27, and last year I delivered twins, and one of my twins was stillborn. So getting pregnant wasn't an issue for me. The only reason why my pregnancy was considered high risk was because it was multiples. But throughout my entire pregnancy, they were like, "Oh, you're so healthy. Your pregnancy is going so well. Like, you're young, you're this, blah, blah, blah." It wasn't toward the end of my pregnancy when, like, now in hindsight, I can see that it was kind of like some red flags being raised. And that's like been a part of my personal journey, is like trying to pick up those pieces and like realize, were those red flags that I could have responded to sooner. But I would say it was about 32 weeks when they started telling me that our daughter was a little bit smaller than our son. But they assured me that everything was fine, that they were both still healthy, that because it was twins and they each had their own placenta, they weren't sharing nutrition. They weren't sharing anything where like one baby was taking something from the other baby, and that's why they were small, that it was just like, she's a girl, she has a separate identity, it's okay for her to be smaller. Okay. So then I would say it was about 34 weeks. Our specialist told us that they wanted to schedule a delivery at 37 weeks because Drew was continuing to stay smaller than Jackson. At 35 weeks was kind of when COVID kind of really hit and everything kind of started getting shut down. So these were the appointments where then I was going to by myself without my husband. And at the 35-week appointment, my specialist told me that he wanted to move the delivery up again by another week. So then, okay, you're going to deliver next week. And from now until then, I want you to come and get steroid shots, get an ultrasound, and just basically like, we're just going to monitor it, but it's not an emergency. I just want to move it up because she's so smaller. Okay. I completely put my trust in my doctor and my specialist and didn't really say like, no, do we need to deliver now? So I went to the first appointment, got the steroid shots. They asked me, do I feel both babies moving? Yeah, everything's fine. I come back the very next day to get a second round of steroid shots. And they asked me, are the babies moving? Yes. Okay, now I have an additional appointment where I'm getting a pre-op appointment with the doctor that would be performing my scheduled C-section and doing an ultrasound. She did the ultrasound and the room went dead silent. I mean, this silence is still like probably the loudest sound I've ever heard. She got very quiet. My husband was on FaceTime with me and he was like, what's going on? I'm like, I don't know. She says, I can't find Drew. I'm having trouble finding Drew. And at this point, I'm like kind of confused, but I'm oblivious to the fact that it's an emergency. And I'm like, oh, like she just can't find Drew. At this point, it's twins and they're both like bigger babies. So during the ultrasounds, sometimes it is harder to see or to like get to the other baby, or, oh, is that baby A's foot or baby B's foot, So it wasn't like a flag for me or a concern for me when she was like, I can't find Drew. She remained very quiet, like while she was doing the ultrasound. And that was very weird for me because at this point, I'd been seeing her during my pregnancy. We talked about what I was going on with work. We talked about COVID. We talked about, everything. So now she's quiet and I'm like, what's going on? She said, I'm going to be right back. I want to go get someone else to come in and I'll be right back. And my husband was like, can I come back? And she said, yes, someone please go get him from the lobby. At this point, I'm like, okay, something's going on, but they still haven't said, Drew's gone. There's no heartbeat. So my husband comes back. The ultrasound tech comes in with the doctor. She's doing the ultrasound as well. And she just looked at the doctor like, yeah, you were right. There's no heartbeat, but they still aren't saying anything. The doctor then said, I'm so sorry. I'm like, sorry for what? The delivery's tomorrow. You guys said everything was fine. I came, I got the steroid shots. Like, what are you sorry about? She says there's no heartbeat. Drew doesn't have a heartbeat. She's gone. You need to go straight to the hospital and you need to deliver now. And I'm in a complete state of shock. My husband went straight into protector mode, straight into, okay, what do we need to do? Where do we go? Who do we talk to when we get to the hospital? All of those type of things. I'm still in a state of, wait, what do you mean? Like, we've been fine this whole pregnancy. You said that everything was fine. You said it was normal for her to be smaller. This was just supposed to be a routine doctor's appointment and our delivery is tomorrow. Like, the nursery is set up, the car seats are in the car, everything is ready for 2 babies. And you're telling me that there's only 1 baby that is alive in my stomach right now. We go immediately to the hospital. And when I got there, I guess I was just expecting for, there to be like a sense of urgency amongst everyone once we got there. And there just wasn't. I think their mindset was just kind of like, the baby's already gone. So there's really no point in us hustling and bustling to like get these babies delivered. At least this is how it felt to me. We get checked in. It was probably like 10:30 a.m. And I didn't deliver until probably like 2:30. So from 10:30 to 2:30, it's just my husband and I sitting in a hospital room, them coming to monitor Jackson, my son. And still like this, at this point, I still don't think it was really real for me because nobody was moving quickly. It wasn't like this urgent situation. So that's my story of, in terms of the loss happening, then transferring to being home, transferring to just being a mother to Jackson, to 1 child when you expected to be a mother to 2. The combination of joy and grief is such I really don't have a word for it. You're in this state of completely losing yourself, completely, I didn't eat, I didn't shower, I didn't this, but I still had to find the energy and the nutrition to produce breast milk for the son that I had that needed me. People's words of encouragement, or what they thought was encouragement, saying, be grateful for the child that you have at home, or, be happy that Jackson's here. Of course you're sad about Drew, but Jackson's here. So, and I just can still never wrap my head around that. To me, if you have 3 kids sitting in your living room and someone said, hey, like, which kid would you do without? You can't choose which kid you would say, I don't want that kid. You're great. You have the love for all your kids. So to have experienced a loss while still trying to be the best mom that I can, all in the same time, and it all happening at once, that was and still is the hardest part for me.
Go back to actually delivering Drew and Jackson and kind of how they allowed you to hold both babies, take pictures with both babies. Were you able to have some type of memorial for her?
Okay.
Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah. So I had a C-section. So Jackson came out first, we heard him crying. They brought him to, let me see him. And then they had to deliver Drew. They delivered Drew, and she and my husband immediately got to go to a room by themselves. And they cleaned her up, got her dressed, and my husband got to spend a lot of time with her one-on-one while they continued to wrap up the surgery on me. I then went to the room and they brought us both babies. They brought Jackson first, and they asked me if I was ready for Drew to come in. It took me a long time, not a long time, but probably longer than it should have been for me to be ready for her to really come into the room. When she came into the room, we were able to take pictures with her, and we held both of them. My husband, I remember he came into the room after he got to spend time with her by himself, and he said, "Oh, babe, wait till you see her. She is beautiful. And she has all her fingers. She has all her toes. She has 2 eyes. I checked everything. She's perfect. She's so beautiful. She looks just like you." And I'll never forget that. When I got told her, I remember her mouth dropped and I lost it. That was the time when I was like, oh my gosh, she is here, but she is not alive. My husband took her from me and she was in the bassinet beside us. And I said, tell them to take her out of the room for a little bit because I just can't handle it. They took her out of the room and they brought her back when we requested for her to come back. But the hospital took such good care of her. Anytime she came back, she was never cold. She was never, in a state where I felt like I was holding this dead baby. They kept her in an outfit. They kept her in a hat, all of those things. Of course, this is the beginning of COVID. So, a lot of things were just closed. A lot of things in places that just were normally open or accessible to us were not. And I remember my cousin actually took care of everything for us. She called me and she said, hey, I have a friend who they're going to come, and we've arranged for the funeral home to come pick her up. And you don't have to worry about anything else. And we said, okay. They came, they picked her up from the hospital. She was cremated. So we do have her ashes in our home. And I got an urn made for her on Etsy. In our home, we have, so actually in October during Infant Loss Awareness Month, we did a memorial walk for her, and then we planted a rose bush in our front yard, and we sprinkled some of the ashes in the ground before putting the rose bush in the ground. And then we do still have her in the urn in our house currently. The hospital gave me the outfit, the hat, the blanket, all of those things. We still have all of that. The hospital, to have such a I'm not really sure the word I'm looking for, but to have such a numb experience in the beginning of getting to the hospital, or feeling okay, is this an urgent situation or is this not an urgent situation? The hospital handled her so well from that point on. Once she was delivered, I 100% felt like she was taken care of, that she was treated with love and respect, and she was, one of the other babies in the nurseries, even though I know she wasn't in the nursery. They put a butterfly on our door so that, anytime the nurses came or they were changing shifts, it was our symbol of, there was a twin here, there was another baby here, so I wasn't having to re-explain our story to the new nurses that were coming on shift. Each nurse was very, very kind to us, and they made our experience really nice, especially considering, again, this was the first week of COVID being shut down in the hospitals, I would say, in terms of visitors. Like my husband was the only one that was allowed at the hospital with me. There was no exceptions. Like if he left and came back and had a fever, like he wasn't able to come back in. So he just didn't leave. So like my parents weren't able to come to the hospital or anything like that. The other thing, we did FaceTime with my parents so that they could see Drew, and that was their way of meeting her, since they weren't able to come into the actual hospital.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that, and the reason why I wanted you to go back and share that, because what a lot of people may not realize is just how some hospitals do have the practice in place for, like a true bereavement care around ensuring, you are well taken care of and your wishes are taken care of, along with you having another, baby in the room as well. So I'm so happy that they went above and beyond, because most hospitals don't do that when it comes to making sure that people didn't come and just kind of re-trigger you on all of the things that were happening as you were just processing them and just trying to get, make way of, this crazy dream that you were in, but it was really reality. So I'm so happy that they were special and they made those memories very, very, very distinctive right after you experienced that. So you were talking about before coming home and just really navigating this pain of, having this child that you thought you were going to come home with, but still having to care for another newborn. So how did you journey through that, really navigating just, the pain of grief, but also having to be mom, and, mom, a living son, and not neglect him, but still grieve, your daughter who you wanted to be here with your son?
Yeah. I would say, well, one, like 100%, I would not be sitting in this seat if it wasn't for my mom and my husband. Like I literally owe my life to them. At the time with COVID being shut down, everything, my mom, she's in childcare. So there was no like in person for her. So she literally for like the first 3 months of my son's life was with me every single day, which was a huge help for me. Even if I physically had him, I didn't have to worry about what I was going to eat, if the laundry was going to be done, those type of things. She 100% just came in and like made me and my husband comfortable, fed all of those things. We also had, or just in general with my husband, he handled the situation just completely different from me. And like now that I've had time to like process my feelings, I go back to him and I say, okay, like it's time for you to process your feelings. Like it's time for you to have like your breakdown, because you've been so strong through this. I just know there's got to be some feelings down there that you need to let out. But in terms of that, that's the only way that I was able to survive and be a mother to my son. I had days where I didn't eat, I didn't shower, I didn't do anything. And it wasn't until my milk supply from breastfeeding was affected by my depression and my lack of nutrition that I was like, okay, Dominique, like you have to get yourself together. I was in the beginning, even though I was sad or I was this, I think that I was in such a state of like, okay, I have this baby right here with me. Like, so I can't even focus on that. It wasn't until probably like 3 weeks, till my son was 3 weeks old, that my depression really hit, and I hit my rock bottom and my milk supply plummeted. And we had to like kind of supplement with formula while my milk supply was coming back type of thing. And that is when I was like, okay, we basically, my husband was like, okay, we're going to start going on walks. We're going to start, what do you need from me so that you can do this? Like, please do not give up. Jackson needs you, all of those things. And in the beginning, I heard him, but I wasn't really hearing him. But when I saw that Jackson had to take formula, or that he was having a hard time like adjusting to the formula, and he literally his survival was my responsibility was when I had to pick up the pieces a little bit for myself, a little bit quicker, I would say. In terms of just being a mom while I was grieving and doing all of that, so I really don't even have words for like what that felt like. I mean, it was just sheer survival. It was sheer grace, like God's grace. It was survival in God's grace. Like I looking back now, if I could see myself like on a camera, I'm like not even recognizable. I don't even know the words for that other than survival, support, and God's grace.
Oh man, I understood. I think that yes, we've all been there and understand what that fog may feel like as you are navigating new motherhood and then grief. And it's almost a mirroring fog where, but thank God for your mom for being, thank God first for the pandemic, because obviously, your mom may not have had the opportunity to take as much time off to help you, but for her to be there to support you and let you go through how you felt and be able to take care of your son, that, thank God for mothers. What will we do without them? What would we do without them? I always say that too. Like, Lord, thank you that my mother's still parenting me in my adult years, because who knows where I would be. Partners who really understand, and really we're grieving too, right? Because your mother lost a granddaughter, your husband lost a daughter, so they still were navigating their own grieving journey, and they were just still trying to make sure that you were okay. So I'm so happy that that you shared that, because we all need the support, especially in the postpartum period. So I would love for you to share about just how you are now. How has motherhood been through this pandemic? We're a year into it now, and how has it been for you?
Yeah. So I've been working from home since, coming back from my maternity leave, and that has 100% helped me, making the transition back into working, where one, like my clients knew I was having twins, my associates knew I was having twins. And sometimes, that information just isn't delayed, that there was a loss. So when they see you're back, they're, oh my God, how are the babies? And being home and being able to fall apart rather than being in the office and having to do that. Again, thank God for um, being home during this time, and just what COVID has done for, in terms of that, of course, being home and being able to just do things a little bit differently. And like us being in this new virtual world where you can turn your camera off, mute your phone, wait a couple minutes to reply to that email, in a sense. In terms of like how I'm doing now and what my healing process has been, I have really, really tried to channel my energy to like what life is going to look like for me after, this loss, and how can I channel my hurt and my pain into positivity and peace, and, how can I help others? How can I be like a source of encouragement for other moms or other people that are just experiencing a loss? I never thought that I would be able to relate to this topic, or be sitting in this chair and doing this interview, or have this story to tell. And for a long time, it was hard for me to accept that, okay, Dominique, like this is your story now. But once I accepted it, and once I have started to pick up the pieces and like learn that grief necessarily isn't a bad thing. Like grief doesn't have to be this thing that destroys you. It's been major for me. In like my motto has just been that like my peace is my responsibility. My biggest takeaway has just been the ways that we honor Drew, because that was what I think I was afraid of when I was first experiencing the loss, or first trying to deal with what grief was going to look like for me, was just like, what if she's forgotten? Or, what if people don't acknowledge her? Or what if people don't acknowledge Jackson's identity as a twin? Or, what is Jackson's identity going to be? Is he going to acknowledge that he's a twin? Do we tell him that he was a twin? Like, just all of those things. So just trying to find resources, and honestly, trying to find resources during COVID was extremely hard. Because you can have a session with a counselor and just those type of things, but sometimes being in person and having like some physical interaction, or some face-to-face in person type of acknowledgement of your feelings is just so important. So definitely dealing with this through COVID has been tough. But yeah, like we've just found ways to honor her. Like I said, we have the rose bush at our house. We have also like our color of representation for her is like lavender, or just like a lilac-y purple. So I made it a point to, like, if I see that color tulips in this grocery store, like I always pick up those tulips and keep them in my office at home. Or then recently, like for Mother's Day, my husband got me a orchid that was that color. So now I keep that in my office, and it's like my little constant reminder of her. I think one of the hardest things has been, the question of, how many kids do you have? Or, oh my God, your son is so beautiful. Now you have to have a daughter because your son is so gorgeous. Those type of things. In the beginning, I would get so upset. I would feel like everybody needed to know Drew's story. Like, if you stopped me in the grocery store and said something about my son and said I need to have a daughter, like, you weren't going to leave that aisle, because I was going to tell you that Jackson was a twin and Drew is somebody. I had a daughter. Like, you're not going to dismiss that. And then I would realize that I would be the one, shaken up, torn apart, and that person got to move on with their day. And that's when I said, okay, my peace is my responsibility. Like, it's no one else's job to protect my peace but myself. So I got a necklace that has a butterfly on it, and that's another way that we represent her. And anytime someone says something, or like, how many kids do I have, or those type of things, and I really just am not feeling like I need to talk about it, or I want to talk about it at that time, I touch my necklace, and that's my way of being like, I got you, girl. Like, you're not forgotten. You're still with me every single day. And like, even though I didn't go into this long drawn story, I got you, Drew. So that's been a major part for me in my healing, I would say.
Perfect. I love it. Absolutely love it. So I would love for you to share any other tools or resources that you've used to help you through your healing journey. I know you mentioned, talking to people and just being open about some of the comments people have said, but any other tools or resources, books, podcasts that have helped you on your journey?
I would say, so at the hospital that I delivered at, we do have a like loss community. And we have like a Facebook group, and we meet once a month. That's been monumental for me, just in the sense that, it's a really lonely journey. Motherhood in general can be extremely lonely. So to be a grieving mother, um, it can be even more lonely. So just having that group of ladies where we can actually talk and interact, and even though it is, through Zoom, it's still a way, it's still an outlet. Another thing, I mean, of course, like Instagram pages like yourself, and like listening to some of the podcast episodes have been helpful for me as well. And just a sense of knowing that, you're not by yourself, that these other women have, I'm only a year into my journey, and some of these other women that I've heard their stories, they're 5 years, they're 10 years, they've been on the journey for a lot longer than me. And I'm like, okay, they're still here. So it's possible for, there to be a life after loss. And that has just been my motto, and just my my source of encouragement, is seeing and knowing that there is life after this. And I think the biggest part for me had been, well, if I become okay and I no longer necessarily grieve, because, you know, when you think of grieving, you think of someone who's just extremely sad all the time, or just, you know, those beginning stages of what it looks like in being curled up in a ball and not showering and not eating and not doing anything else, and, you know, not wanting to go anywhere. And if I become okay and now my life looks normal, you know, will people forget my story? Will people forget that Drew is somebody? Will people forget that I had a daughter? Will people forget that Jackson is a twin? And no, they don't. Like, your story is still there. Your story is still important. And you know, the biggest, I'm not gonna say the biggest, but I just had to learn that grief is like glitter. You know, you have this big party, so you have like the situation, the glitter is everywhere, you clean up the glitter, and then a month later, 2 months later, 3 months later, you go to move a shelf, or you go to move a whatever it is that was, and dang, there's some glitter on the floor. Like, you know, and it's okay. And that's the biggest part for me, has been learning that it's okay, for me to change what grief looks like, what my grieving process looks like, what my appearance looks like, and to just stay encouraged.
So, what encouraging words can you leave with our listeners as we are all kind of navigating grief through COVID? But now, you know, for those who may have experienced a loss through the pandemic.
Yeah, my words of advice are to protect your peace, find what peace looks like to you, and set that emotional or mental goal for yourself. I knew that I wanted to be able to do certain things without being triggered. You know, find what my triggers are, acknowledge them, and find ways to cope with those triggers. So, like, one of my triggers was people asking me, how many kids do you have? My answer to that, or like my solution to that, was like getting my necklace, and that being my way of acknowledging her and wearing her every day, and those type of things. Set a goal for yourself, set what that emotional, mental, spiritual goal looks like for you. And just like you said, a financial goal or a professional goal or something like that, you know, have some things that you can work towards that are maybe not necessarily tangible, but that are things that you can work towards. And again, learning that your piece is, you know, your responsibility, finding your support system. I recognize that everyone doesn't have a supportive partner, or everyone doesn't have, you know, a mom that's able to kind of drop what they're doing and be with you for 3 months, or those type of things. But sometimes it's a friend, or sometimes it's, you know, a nurse, or it's a neighbor, it's someone else. But just find what your support system looks like and embrace it. Sometimes it's hard to accept the support that people want to give you, but if you find some genuine support there, lean into it.
Thank you so much, Dominique, for being on the podcast. Where can our listeners connect with you after this episode?
Yeah, so I am on Instagram at Dom Timmons, DOMTIMMONS. And that's my Instagram page. I kind of just share like my journey of what motherhood has been like for me, and being like a new mom, a new wife, still working professionally and surviving this pandemic, all while having a child at home, and still trying to be a good wife, and grieving, and, you know, trying to figure out what my life is going to look like as I continue to discover what this loss means to me.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much again. I know that your story is going to bless this community.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And thank you for having this platform I think that just having this community and having this platform to even be able to share my story is monumental in my own healing. So I really appreciate your time today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. For show notes, go to sistersinloss.com. To stay connected with us and join the Sisters in Loss community and receive my weekly newsletter, please go to sistersinloss.com/newsletter. That is sistersinloss.com/newsletter. Please rate and review this episode, and I will talk to you next week.